After the family reunion, I noticed $8,000 missing. My brother-in-law denied taking it. Dad said, "He's struggling, and it's just money." So I quietly called the cops. They didn't realize what happened next. I, 34 never thought I'd be the type to call the police on family. But when you work 16-hour shifts in an ER and save every penny for 2 years to finally afford something that matters, priorities become clear real fast. The family reunion happened on a Saturday in late October. My sister had insisted on hosting it at my place since I'd just bought my first house, a modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs that had taken everything I had to scrape together. She thought it would be nice for everyone to see what I'd accomplished. I should have said no. About 30 people showed up. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since childhood, and of course, my sister and her husband. He'd been unemployed for 8 months, something my sister mentioned at least 4 times during the afternoon with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Every time someone asked how they were doing, she'd pivot to talking about my new house, my career, anything to avoid the obvious tension sitting between them like a third person. I'd stashed the cash in my bedroom closet, tucked inside an old shoebox beneath a stack of winter sweaters. Stupid, I know, but I'd withdrawn it that Friday specifically because I was meeting a guy on Monday who was selling his used car, a reliable sedan that wouldn't break down on my commute to the hospital. The bank was closed weekends, and I didn't want to risk losing the deal. $8,000 in hundreds, counted and recounted, rubber-banded in neat stacks. The reunion went fine, I suppose. People ate, laughed, took photos in my backyard. My brother-in-law spent most of the afternoon on his phone, sitting in corners, barely engaging. I noticed him disappearing upstairs twice, but I didn't think much of it. People needed to use the bathroom. My dad kept pulling me aside to tell me how proud he was, how far I'd come since medical school, how this house was just the beginning. Mom cried happy tears in my kitchen while washing dishes that didn't need washing. Everyone left around 8. My sister and her husband were the last to go, and she hugged me extra tight at the door, thanking me for hosting. Her husband shook my hand without making eye contact, mumbled something about a nice place, and they were gone. I found the money missing at 11 that night. I'd gone upstairs to grab a jacket because the temperature had dropped, and something made me check the shoebox. Maybe intuition, maybe paranoia from working in an ER where you learn to trust your gut about people. The box was there, the sweaters were there, but the stacks of bills were gone. Just gone. I tore apart my closet like a madman, thinking maybe I'd moved them and forgotten. I checked every drawer, every jacket pocket, under the bed, in the bathroom cabinet. Nothing. My hands were shaking when I called my sister at midnight. She answered groggy and confused, and I asked her if her husband had gone upstairs during the party. There was a long pause before she asked why. I told her about the money. She went silent for so long I thought the call had dropped, and then she said she'd call me back. She didn't call back. He did, 20 minutes later. His voice was defensive immediately, asking what I was accusing him of, whether I was seriously suggesting he'd steal from family. I stayed calm and told him I wasn't accusing anyone, just trying to figure out what happened. He insisted he'd only gone upstairs once to use the bathroom, and maybe once more to take a call in private, because it was too loud downstairs. His explanation sounded rehearsed, too detailed for someone who should have been half asleep and confused. I told him I'd probably misplaced it, and I'd keep looking. I didn't sleep that night. Sunday morning, I called my dad. He came over within an hour, and I showed him the empty shoebox, explained the whole situation. He listened with that patient expression he always had, the one that made you feel like everything would be okay because Dad was there. When I finished, he sat down heavily on my bed and rubbed his face. He suggested maybe I'd moved the money somewhere safer and forgotten. I told him I'd searched everywhere. He asked if I was absolutely certain it was taken during the party. I told him I'd counted it Friday night, and it was definitely there Saturday morning before anyone arrived, because I'd checked one more time out of anxiety. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. He told me her husband was struggling, really struggling, and that losing his job had destroyed his confidence. He said the guy was drowning and probably desperate, and that money, while important, was just money. He could help me with the car purchase if needed. He asked me to think about what calling the police would do to my sister, to her marriage, to the family. He reminded me that we take care of our own, that airing dirty laundry publicly would hurt everyone. I stood there listening to my father essentially confirm my brother-in-law had stolen from me while simultaneously asking me to let it go. I told Dad I needed time to think. He hugged me before leaving, told me he loved me, and said he trusted me to do the right thing. The weight of those words felt like an anchor. I spent Sunday afternoon sitting in my empty house, thinking about every double shift I'd worked, every time I'd chosen to eat ramen instead of ordering takeout, every canceled plan with friends because I was saving for something stable. That money represented sacrifice. It represented finally having something of my own after years of debt and exhaustion. And my father wanted me to just swallow it because family. I called the non-emergency police line at 4 p.m. Sunday. The officer who answered was professional and patient as I explained the situation. I gave him the timeline, the amount, the circumstances. He said they'd send someone to take a report. 2 officers arrived an hour later, both calm and methodical as they walked through my house, examined the closet, took notes. I gave them my brother-in-law's name and address when they asked if I had any suspects. One officer, older with gray at his temples, asked me if I was sure I wanted to pursue this, knowing it was family. I told him I was sure. He nodded slowly and said they'd be in touch. My phone started ringing at 6 p.m. My sister, hysterical, screaming about how police had just shown up at her door asking about stolen money. She called me every name she could think of, asked how I could do this to her, told me I'd destroyed her marriage and her life. I let her scream until she ran out of breath, then quietly told her I'd given her husband a chance to return it, and he'd lied to my face. She hung up. Dad called 10 minutes later. His voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before, asking what I'd done. I explained everything calmly. He told me I'd made a terrible mistake, that I should have come to him first, that he could have handled this within the family. I reminded him he'd already handled it by taking the thief's side. He said I was being selfish and cruel, that I clearly didn't understand what family meant. I told him I understood perfectly. It meant some people got to steal, and others were expected to smile about it. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next 3 days were silent. No calls, no texts. I went to work, came home, existed in this strange bubble where I'd apparently been excommunicated for having the audacity to report a crime. Thursday afternoon, I got a call from the investigating officer. They'd obtained a warrant and searched my brother-in-law's home. They'd found $6,200 in cash hidden in his garage, tucked inside a toolbox. When confronted, he'd admitted to taking the money, claiming he'd panicked about bills and convinced himself I wouldn't notice right away, that he'd return it before I did. He was being charged with felony theft. The officer asked if I wanted to pursue full prosecution or if I'd accept restitution. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds and told him I wanted full prosecution. My phone exploded Friday morning. My sister left a 15-minute voicemail that was mostly sobbing, begging me to drop the charges, saying her husband had made a mistake but didn't deserve to have his life ruined, that they'd pay back every penny. My mom called crying, saying I was tearing the family apart. Cousins I barely knew sent messages telling me I was heartless. Dad showed up at my door Friday evening unannounced. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. He came inside without asking and sat at my kitchen table. He told me he'd spent the week thinking about everything, about how he'd handled the situation, about what he'd asked me to do. He admitted he'd been wrong to dismiss my concerns, wrong to prioritize keeping the peace over what was right. Then he told me something that made the entire week make sense. 15 years ago, my uncle, Dad's younger brother, had stolen money from their mother's account while she was sick with cancer. A substantial amount, nearly $20,000, meant for her medical care. Dad had found out and covered it up, paid the money back himself, never told anyone because he didn't want to destroy his brother or hurt his mother in her final months. She died never knowing. His brother never faced consequences, never even properly apologized, and their relationship had never been the same. Dad had carried that resentment for 15 years, and when he saw my situation, he defaulted to the same broken logic: protect the family image at any cost. But watching me stand firm had forced him to confront something he'd buried. He said I'd done what he should have done years ago, and while it was painful, it was right. He told me he supported my decision, even if it cost him relationships with other family members who didn't understand. We sat in silence for a while after that, and then he asked about the car I'd been planning to buy. I told him the deal had fallen through since I'd been waiting for the police investigation to return the money. He nodded and said he'd help me find another one, and this time we'd go together. The case moved forward. My brother-in-law took a plea deal, guilty plea in exchange for probation, mandatory counseling, and full restitution, including the missing 1,800 he'd already spent. The money was returned to me in full 6 weeks later through a court-ordered payment plan. My sister stopped speaking to me entirely. She moved out of state 3 months later, filed for divorce, and I haven't heard from her since. Mom maintains minimal contact, still hurt that I chose money over family, though she's slowly coming around. Most of the extended family sided against me, viewing me as vindictive and cold. But something unexpected happened. 2 of my younger cousins reached out privately. Both told me they'd experienced similar situations: money borrowed and never returned, items stolen, boundaries violated, all dismissed by older family members as keeping the peace. They thanked me for standing up, said it had given them courage to set their own boundaries. One of them had gone no contact with a sibling who'd stolen their identity for credit cards. The other had finally reported a cousin who'd taken their grandmother's jewelry. My relationship with Dad became stronger than it had ever been. We started having dinner every week, real conversations about things we'd never discussed. He started going to therapy to work through his guilt about his brother. He admitted that enabling bad behavior in the name of family had done more damage than any confrontation could have. I bought the car in January, paid cash, and it's still running perfectly. Every time I drive it, I think about what it represents, not just transportation, but the willingness to stand alone when standing alone is the right thing to do. People still ask if I regret calling the police. They ask if $8,000 was worth losing half my family. They imply I'm materialistic, heartless, that I valued money over relationships. But they're asking the wrong question. It was never about the money. It was about the principle that some people don't get a free pass to hurt others just because you share DNA. It was about refusing to participate in a system where victims are expected to stay silent so perpetrators can stay comfortable. It was about recognizing that real family doesn't ask you to diminish yourself to protect people who wronged you. My brother-in-law didn't just steal $8,000. He stole from someone who'd worked themselves to exhaustion for it, knowing exactly what it meant, and then lied about it without hesitation. And when caught, the family rallied around him, not because they thought he was innocent, but because admitting his guilt was inconvenient. So yes, I called the cops. And yes, I'd do it again. Because the alternative was teaching him that family means consequence-free zones for bad behavior. It was teaching everyone watching that theft is acceptable if you're struggling. It was teaching myself that my work, my sacrifice, my boundaries don't matter when weighed against someone else's comfort. I sleep fine at night in my quiet house with my paid-off car in the garage and my principles intact. The family gatherings are smaller now, but the people who show up are the ones who understand that respect and accountability aren't optional just because you share last names. Dad and I are planning a fishing trip next month, something we haven't done since I was a kid. Mom sent me a text last week asking about my schedule, tentatively suggesting coffee. Maybe things will never go back to how they were. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Because the family I have now is built on honesty instead of enabling, on boundaries instead of guilt, on the understanding that love doesn't mean tolerating harm. And that's worth more than any reunion ever was.